I'm Gary Nickerson,
And I'm Quinn Taggart.
and this is Outside My Window. Town of Digby Mayor Ben Cleveland has been a lifelong resident of the town of Digby. He's married to his wife Karen. They have two children, Bethany and Sarah. He's been a member of the Digby Fire Department for the last 31 years and is now retired and, of course, involved in many other community groups. He's been on council for the past 16 years, 12 of those as mayor. Mayor, welcome.
Well, it's great to speak to you two. I haven't spoken to you for more than a year, but obviously COVID has shut us all down.
Well, and speaking of which, how
Mhm.
has the town of Digby fared? I mean, have you been able to pivot with all the restrictions up, down, and sideways in order to be able to keep the town business running?
Yeah, I think, obviously for the first few months it was a bit of a sticker shock with service industry being shut down and everybody kind of walking around in a bit of a daze as to where we're headed. The announcement that all our festivals were going to be not going to be held last or the year before. But it's something I think with Nova Scotians, and especially rural Nova Scotians, there used to be a saying, and now I'm not putting up my political affiliations, but Tory times were hard times. So pandemic times are hard times in the Maritimes, but we seem to get through it. We take a step back and say, let's work together here to make things happen. That's what the town tried to do with the local businesses and offer them support of some sort, mostly mental support.
No, obviously, and you mentioned festivals, and I guess
Mm-hmm.
that was one of our topics of conversation. So let's bring that up now.
Yeah.
I've seen a couple of them come back, but two of the main staples that town of Digby is known for, of course, is the Wharf Rat Rally and Scallop Days. So, how's the outlook for those?
Last year we had Scallop Days and Lobster Bash reinvent themselves. Obviously, they worked within the COVID restrictions that were in place at the time. I think it was phase 4. So they were scaled back considerably. But there were some decent crowds. And a lot of people went out just to say, hey, listen, we're here to support you and we look forward to next year. Obviously, the Warfare Rally, which can bring 20, 30,000 people into town over 4 to 5 days, was just something that you couldn't scale back and you just couldn't do safely. But the rally, unfortunately for them, a year and a half ago, they hired a management firm that was going to run the rally, work with the local board, but they haven't had the opportunity to show what they were going to be able to do for us because they've been shut down twice. But they're in planning mode now. They're meeting now, actually, for next year.
That's excellent.
Yeah. It's a big economic driver for us.
Yeah, I mean, I got to say, it's a huge driver. It brings a ton of people. What's the economic spin on that? Have you guys calculated that?
There's been a number of studies, Events Nova Scotia, Canadian University. There hasn't been any in the last 2, 3, 4 years, but the last one that was done recognized that the rally brought in close to $8 million provincially and around 2.9 million to the town of Digby. Now that study lost a track of time because it seems like last year disappeared, but it's probably 6 or 7 years ago. So yes, it's a huge rally. One of the local restaurants that I talked to when the rally was at its peak was bringing in 40, 50 extra people to work that week as servers and bartenders and entertainers and things. So it's it's a huge drop in revenue for the businesses and in the town, actually.
So, with the various restrictions being eased so far as COVID is concerned, Mayor Cleveland, are you finding the numbers perhaps gradually increasing?
Over the last 2 or 3 weeks, as I mentioned, I go to a local establishment, stand behind the bar to talk to tourists, and I've talked to tourists from Central Canada, Vancouver, Germany, Italy, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and obviously the Eastern Seaboard. The one establishment that I talked to, comparing their revenue to a year ago this time, they're up. at the same time period. But overall for the year, they're still down 50, 60%. But it appears that people are starting to relax, accept some of the restrictions, and decide going out.
Over the last few years, Mayor, what have you heard? What's the feedback you get from people? Why do they like to come in and spend time in Digby?
Well, look at our waterfront. I know every town or most villages or towns in the province are on the waterfront, but Digby has a beautiful waterfront overlooking the Annapolis Basin. We're 5 minutes from the Bay of Fundy. We're 30 minutes from some of the best whale watching in the country, or maybe even in the world. And they obviously come here for our seafood. And there was a recent study just put out by, I'm not sure which firm online, but it said Digby are some of the friendliest people in the province. We're always chatting it up with somebody.
As far as the ferry is concerned, the Fundy Rose, are you finding that the majority of tourists come to the Digby area on the ferry, or do they just drive around? What do they find more convenient?
Uh, Three things. Unfortunately, the ferry in Yarmouth is not running, but we did get a large influx of Americans taking that ferry. The Fundy Rose is more of a commercial ferry, but it does bring its fair share of tours in. And they changed their schedule so that it would leave at a more convenient time in Digby. So they would come into Digby the day before or several days before, stay overnight, enjoy the restaurants, and then they were able to get up in the morning and have breakfast and catch the ferry. And then those that do drive around. So all three of those entry points are very important to Digby and Southwest Nova.
Can you speak about the importance of the Nova Scotia to Maine ferry? A lot of people call it the Yarmouth ferry. I like to hear people call it the Nova Scotia ferry. How important is that to tourism in your area?
When that ferry was off, and then when it went off, we noticed a difference in tourism, especially from the eastern seaboard of the U.S. Even though you can argue that it's not a long drive from Calais around to Digby or Yarmouth or Halifax, but we lose a considerable portion of people. When they enter Nova Scotia, they can turn right a little bit and head to the Halifax, or they turn left and they go to Cape Breton. We could argue all day about the cost of that ferry, and it's unfortunate what has happened, but that ferry needs to come back on because it's important to Digby.
So they're obviously looking to bring that back in, say, in the spring of 2022. Um, are you looking for immediate impact at that point, or do you think it'll take a little bit of time before things kind of ramp up?
Some of the industry people in the tourism industry feel, though, it will probably be 23, maybe 2024, but if we see the tourism's numbers back, or they anticipate a little higher than they have been. So, no, I don't think maybe 2022 we're going to see a large influx of tourists. Obviously, there's so many factors involved. The border could be closed. COVID wave 5, 6 could be around. So one of the local facilities in town will be going through a large infrastructure improvement, are telling me they're aiming for 23, 24 to a return to normalcy, although they've had a great year this year.
Speaking of infrastructure, Mayor, I guess, is it tough for people to plan? Given how COVID restrictions have gone up, down, up, down, up, down, the border's been open, the border's closed, the U.S. border's still closed for outbound traffic, but not inbound traffic, et cetera. That's going to make it tough for people to plan ahead for any kind of infrastructure improvements, including yourselves.
Yeah, it is. We're going, or will be this winter, looking at a facade program where, similar to something like Yarmouth has put into place, where we'll hopefully offer some financial assistance, but those businesses have been struggling just to keep the doors open. So it is tough to plan, although I always question the town of Digby and the outlying areas, about 9,000 people. We have, just from the highway to the ferry, we have 35 places to eat, just unheard of. So obviously we like doing one thing in Digby, is eating. Yeah, yeah. But I talk to a lot of business owners, and they're just besides the loss of business, obviously they're taking advantage of the provincial and federal programs that are out there, which has kept some of them rolling along. But they don't know what direction to head. For instance, a restaurant. Some of the restaurants, their business plan was simply dine in and enjoy entertainment. Now, will that return to the way it was? I think so, but I think it's going to be a few years before it does, before people are totally comfortable sitting out. So some of them are changing, obviously going to more takeout than dine in. So those type of businesses are struggling. Now we hear home improvement business just took off because everybody was home.
Yeah, certainly there was three main hobbies that came up under COVID. One was DIY, second was cooking, and the other one, it seems to have been alcohol, given given the recent earnings report from NSLC, and or make your own alcohol. I guess if you really want to go down that
Yeah,
road.
yeah.
So with that in mind, housing is something that kind of comes up because it ties right back into, I know from here and everywhere that people are having a little hard time to get people to come and come back into work. But, that's kind of circles back to having places to live.
It's a real struggle for Digby. Like I think a lot of other communities, there is a large group of individuals meeting and trying to wade themselves through the housing issue. There's a number of things with housing. One is we talk about affordable housing, but it has to be quality housing. There's a lot of people that can't afford, high-end, expensive apartments, but they deserve to live in quality housing. So I think it's affordable in quality housing because we have some housing around here that you could tend to say is affordable, but I wouldn't want to put anybody in there. It's a real lack of housing. I constantly see on Facebook people saying they would love to move into Digby, but there's no place for them. And the other challenge is we have a lot of professionals that want to move into the area, and they can't find good quality rentals. A lot of times you're in here for a few years. Although we do have some apartment buildings that will be coming on the books over the next 1, 2, 3 years. But they aren't going to take care of the people that unfortunately live with low incomes. We're going to need assistance from all levels of government and industry to solve this issue.
Which levels of government do you think it makes sense for this to fall under?
Well, apparently 40 years ago, it was somewhat of more of a municipal issue. And then the province stepped in and took that over and come out with their Department of Housing. I think provincial. There hasn't been in Digby, it's probably been 25, 30 years at least since there's been any affordable housing built in the town or even near the town. So
That doesn't sound right. I mean,
no, yeah, no, but that is right. We haven't had a lot of affordable housing built, although our population has decreased. We have a lot more people living at poverty levels, $21,000 in income, family income at $35,000. So that's tough when you have to rent an apartment at $1,000 or $1,500 a month on top of utilities and everything else. So
has the
it's
average
tough.
age shifted as well? Are you into a more senior population?
Yes, 47, 48 is the average age, and just in town and in Southwest Over. I think in Halifax, the average age is something like 35. Obviously, because of the younger professionals and universities there help that. But in the rural areas right across the province, it's in the high 40s, and that's going to rapidly change unless we come up with some industry.
I want to ask you about healthcare, the delivery of, and accessibility. First of all, these ongoing closures of local emergency rooms, obviously very, very challenging for folks to get quality care. Mayor, are you concerned that this will keep continuing? I saw a story just today that there's some 1,000 vacancies for nurses of varying, whether it's registered nurses or CNAs. Obviously, there's no quick fix for this, is there?
No, we've had citizen groups, we've had elected officials that have been working on this for decades. We had a group back in 1980, 83 called MENIC, Medical Emergency and Healthcare, or the exact words, because they could see what was coming. Digby, over the last couple of years, we've been fortunate. Our emerge hasn't been closed very often until recently, and that is because we may have a doctor, but we don't have an RN, and you can't operate in the emerge with a registered nurse in there, as with nursing homes, and even some of the nursing homes continually struggle to find RNs. Doctors or healthcare professionals, they're all looking for different things. A young resident just coming out of school with a $300,000 or $400,000 debt doesn't need to come into a community where they need to pay $40,000 or $45,000 in rent. Although you could argue that somebody opening up a business has to do that, but if we want to have a doctor come into our community, we need to assist them for 1, 2, 3, 4 years to get them going. You need to be able to take care of their partner, who quite often is a professional, and you need something for their children to do. And the community needs to engage them. A doctor isn't, or nurse isn't a tool. You bring them in, you go and see them, and then you go home. You should go to your doctor and say, hey, do you want to go for a round of golf? Do you want to go for dinner? You want to go sailing? Make them part of the community. Make it hard for them to leave.
Because you're really hiring the family, not just the doctor.
You are. Yes, you are.
And that's really tough.
Yeah. I will tell you a funny story. A number of years ago, I was my wife and I were invited to a local function where there was a doctor visiting from Ontario, he and his partner, and we had a great evening. When I left, I looked at my wife and said, they're not coming here. And she said, well, how can you make that judgment? I said, she's carrying a Louis Vuitton purse. There's no Louis Vuitton purses in Digby stores. So I knew they weren't coming. They didn't. They went to Ontario somewhere. But yeah, it is about the family. And the other thing is, you can't bring a doctor in a small community like this by themselves. You have to have 3, 4 doctors come collectively so they can work together and socialize together and learn from each other. We brought 1 or 2 doctors in, and they get burned. They get burned out.
What about international affiliations? Is it still really, really tough to get a qualified doctor from a different country to come in and then qualify in Canada?
It is. We've come across some doctors that are interested in coming here, but because of licensing restrictions, NSHA says they don't qualify, or they have to go through a number of exams, and quite often they're really not prepared to do that. They're probably wonderful doctors, wonderful people, and they've gone through their licensing requirements in the countries that they are, but they hit Canada and they hit Nova Scotia and say, no, we're not interested in doing that now at this stage of life. Usually, a lot of times it's an older doctor, and they just want to come to a rural community, go for an adventure, and so they're not interested in doing that. They have focused on countries like Ireland and in South Africa and other countries now, but no results yet.
What about some sort of a homegrown solution? Finding somebody locally that may be interested in pursuing that career, and then you just kind of tie them in to say 2, 3, 4 years of service in a rural community when they get out. I mean, are those kinds of options available? And I don't necessarily mean just for the town of Digby, but are you seeing that kind of scenario being popped up?
Yes. So actually, we'll be having a conversation sometime over the next month or two from a local resident that is a doctor that grew up here, went to school, and now working not too far from us, but they're interested in talking about coming back to the home community. And we always make inquiries and or listen to see who at the high school may be going off to medical school. Many of them go off and become, specialty internal medicine and a lot of things like that. And the other, a lot of them don't go into family medicine, and one of the reasons is there's not a lot of seats available for them, and they're also not well paid as a family doctor. Now, I think they're the most important doctor. That's your first doctor you see, but they're not well paid for what they do. Although that has improved, I will admit that has improved over the last year or two. The government has made them, I think, family residents and doctors in the province some of the highest paid in the Maritimes, if not the highest paid. But family doctors still struggle.
What about alternative solutions like the RN situations where you have a specialty there?
Mm. We've been fortunate that we've attracted up to sometimes to 6 or 7 nurse practitioners, and that is really who is taking care of our clinic here now. We have a lot of locum doctors coming in, but the NPs, the nurse practitioners, have made a huge difference here in Digby. They'll have specialty clinics. They'll have clinics for those that don't have doctors, although it's still difficult to get in there. They've really helped us over the last 3 or 4 years, and they're well trained, and we love them here. We love the nurse practitioners.
One thing that came up in our conversation with MLA Zach Churchill when he was the Minister for Health was virtual care.
Yep.
Is that something that's popped up more frequently in Digby as well?
It is, yeah. I haven't had the opportunity to use it myself, but I know others have used it. Some still feel they don't have that connect with the doctor or the specialist they're meeting, but I think there is a big role for that. And I haven't heard of a lot of dissatisfaction with it. And it is held here. It's held at our clinic.
The province recently announced some funding to hire staff and purchase vehicles through EHS to help with patient transfers in hopes that will ease some of the burden on the the delivery of ambulance service. Do you think that makes sense? Do you think that will help in the situation at Digby General, for instance?
Paramedics didn't become paramedics to be. I don't want to sound harsh, but they didn't become paramedics to be taxi drivers. They become paramedics because they want to help people. And yes, transferring them from hospital to hospital is a part of the healthcare system. But then to transfer them from Instant Digby to Kemptville or Yarmouth and to have them sit there for 2 or 3 hours, no, that's not. I think it does make sense to do that. I think. Where I believe that should have been seen a number of years ago. We got a rapidly aging population, and we have a huge number of people, as you mentioned, or we mentioned earlier, without doctors and multi layers of healthcare issues. So a lot of people in this region can go to a doctor, and the doctor will tell you, "I'm only here to talk to you about one issue," and they'll have 4 or they'll have 5. So their health is poor, so they're always moving those patients from hospital to hospital. Take the burden off the paramedics, let them do what they do, be first responders, and have somebody else transport them, so they're always available for that emergency.
Long-term care has been another big issue. So, talk about that as far as the town of Digby is concerned. We know that, a lot of people who, should be in long-term care facilities, in beds in those facilities are being kept in hospital through no fault of their own. How does government fix that, and what are you seeing in your community?
Digby, our long-term health care facility was replaced 15 years ago, not long before Yarmouth was built. So it's a 91 bed unit with one for respite. It's a beautiful facility. The residents, it's resident driven, really. They follow what's called Eden model care, but it's only 91 people. And yes, you're right. There are people that have gone into the hospital and waited, or they need to be transferred to another community and wait months to get back into Digby. And I'm aware of some that have done that. And it's hard too, because especially not only Digby, for instance, a community like Clare, which is a French-speaking community, and I know there's people from Digby that aren't French-speaking, but they're in Clare. That's not fair to them, and it's not fair to somebody from Clare be moved from their culture to Digby. So the solution is to find more beds, but that's going to be costly, and we need to be prepared to pay for it.
Well, one of the platform promises that the Conservatives had was, oh, we'll just go out and we're going to hire 1,000 doctors, and we're gonna solve the healthcare problem by doing that. That's not going to work.
Uh, well,
You got to find 1,000 people first.
yeah, you have to find them, and then you have to. It has been said to me in the past from the provincial governments, not this one, but in the past, we'll bring doctors to the province. It's up to your community to get into Digby, but it's tough. If they're going to hire 1,000 doctors, then there needs to be some kind of agreement that do fan out into the rurals to help us out. But you're right. To go and find 1,000 doctors, that's going to be tough because everybody's looking for doctors.
Well, that's right. I mean, there's huge competition, and that's where it kind of comes down to the amenities in the community. What have you got to offer? Proximity to other amenities that might be, of interest to them. But, throwing bodies at it isn't going to solve the problem. It goes back, as you mentioned, a lot further than that.
Yeah. It's people need to realize that there's numerous organizations involved in healthcare in the province. You have the Department of Health, you have the Nova Scotia Health NHHA, you have your local health authority, you have the College of Physicians, you have the universities. So, and I can't say they're not having conversations. I'm aware that they are having conversations, but all these bodies need to sit down and really look at the management of healthcare overall and streamline it and because it's become so complicated over the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years. I've been sitting on a healthcare committee for 15 years, and I learned something new every time I go. Wouldn't be aware of something or not aware of this, can't do this, can't do that. It's been a great experience, but by now I should have a degree in healthcare, but I haven't got it yet.
Well, healthcare, mixology, I mean, you're quite a diverse person.
Yes. Well, I'm a chemist. Let's not say mixology. I'm a chemist.
Chemist, that's right. Well, it's all science.
Yeah, it's all science.
Mayor, I want to ask you about the voice that municipal units like the town of Digby have as far as the province is concerned, through the Union of Nova Scotia Municipalities, nationally through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and forgive me if I got the name wrong. You've been on council many, many years. Has that communication with both levels of government improved or stayed the same? Are you being listened to?
Early on, I was frustrated. Sometimes I can be vocal and speak off the cuff, and I have done that, and I've been told by the province I can't say that. Well, I'm elected by the people of Digby, so yes, I can say it. I felt over the last number of years it was improving. There is what's called Department of Municipal Affairs. They're there. They're there for us, and the communication needs to happen between the two of us constantly. A lot of times we're just as fault as they are. We get caught up in our daily business. We just reach out to them when we have some kind of need an interpretation on something or some advice, but we don't do it as often as we should. And I've always said to the MLAs in our area, don't forget about your municipal governments. As you always heard, we're the closest to the people. We have conversations every day, and a lot of times they're about provincial matters. And they'll come to have a conversation with us first before they take it a little further. So, yes, the whole level of government the various level of governments needs to reinvent themselves. I don't know what it's going to be, but it does need to reinvent themselves.
At what point do you think that needs to happen? Like, is that a yesterday thing, or is that
Well,
something
I
that
think it
can?
was a yesterday thing.
Yeah.
More and more things are coming down from the province all the time. People don't realize that in the town of Digby or in the municipality of Digby or the town of Yarmouth, etc., they say, well, the property tax bill goes to pay for roads and water and sewer. It does, but it also pays for public housing. It also pays for justice. It also pays for schools. That money gets sent off to the province, but we have very little say in those issues. But the people in the town are paying that, and most times they don't realize it. But so there needs to be more open dialogue, and like I said a moment ago, that is both levels' fault.
What role do you see the federal government playing in a lot of these sorts of major issues that you're having now? If you take
Um,
COVID aside, like let's strip
yeah,
that part back, just on the basic day to day kind of things. How much do you think the federal government should poke their nose into and to be able to assist?
well, I think most look at the federal government as dealing with national policy, international policy, defense, and in social assistance programs. Um, I, well, maybe they should just be our banker, which tends to be what they are when we're doing large infrastructure projects. They assist us, um, but that's a big, huge machine. They can't focus on the town of Digby. The province, the provincial government should be able to help focus on the town of Digby or the town of Yarmouth or the village of Weymouth. So a much smaller machine, and we bump into each other all the time. But the federal government is a huge machine, and I don't think they can they can focus on 2,100 people in the town here.
When we look at pots of money to do different things, people say, well, can't you take some of the money out of this pot and put it in this pot and do different things? And of course, the answer is usually no, you can't. It's designated for a specific purpose. Should it be a little bit more free? Should you be a little bit more in control of the pot and make a decision on where it's needed more?
As you may have heard from others, our budget is 72%, I think, of our budget, or close to that, is fixed. When I say fixed, RCMP, school, justice, and then obviously highways and things like roads and things like that. So we don't have a lot of flexibility on that to move money. We cannot pay our school bill. We cannot pay our justice bill or a public housing bill. Those are provincial legislations, and if we don't pay them, then we face other restrictions. So we have to pay those bills. So it's tough for somebody to walk into my office and say, Ben, I don't agree with that project over there. I want that money moved here. Well, we didn't get any funding for that project on the right-hand side, but we did get it for the left-hand side, so that's where we need to focus. We have a document, a legal agreement called the Municipal Governance Act that tells us what we can or can't do, and that's been reviewed, and it is being reviewed, which hopefully, and it has loosened up some, but hopefully it'll allow us to be much more flexible in the future.
How have you been communicating with the residents in the last little while? I mean, COVID's kind of put everybody at a bit of a disadvantage for public events or attendance
Yeah.
in that sort of way. But how have you been communicating with the residents of the town of Digby and letting them know what's going on?
Well, we have a newsletter that goes out with our water bills. It's on the back of our water bills, just telling people what's happening. We did put out a number of special uh, newsletters last year. And you mentioned my mixology course, so I have lots of conversations with residents around what's going on, and I'm constantly out on the street or around, usually limping around right now, but it just hey, what's going on? Drop into a business, see what's going on, say hi, or stop somebody on the street and see how they're doing. We're a small community, so it's very easy to get out around and talk to people and listen. And the big thing is most of them just want to be able to talk and vent and relax a little bit.
Are your council meetings live streamed?
No, they are on YouTube, but they're not live streamed. We have the technology to film, but not live stream yet, and that will happen. Yes, I still encourage people to come to town council meetings. I know 99% of it's boring because we're just discussing policy and procedures. But if you leave us sitting around the room by ourselves, we might make a decision that you're not going to be happy with. So come and keep us in tune once in a while.
That's absolutely true. And
Yeah.
having been involved with Eastlink as many years as I've had, I've had my share of council meetings, both municipality of Argyle, municipality of Yarmouth, and the town of Yarmouth. So I certainly can relate to that, where just something will sneak in there, and you're not going to be happy about it. Make sure
Yep.
you participate and be part of the
Exactly.
process.
Yep. If you believe in democracy, at least vote. And if you really believe in it, get involved.
And it's a great way to learn. Like Quinn, I've covered my share of council meetings over, the course of 40 years. And it's a wonderful learning experience. I've always said that they should teach civics in the school. Quinn was asking you about what people understand about moving money around and what responsibilities different levels of government and sitting down at a council meeting or watching on YouTube is a great way to learn and
Yeah.
understand,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I wish they would teach civics in high school again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Explain
totally
the
agree.
difference. Yeah, yeah. Explain the difference municipal and provincial and federal because people don't understand. They just look as elected officials and all the same pot, and we're not. We all have different responsibilities. So I wish they'd get back to that.
I I, I miss my old friend Ken Langell, rest his soul.
Yes,
That was
Ken. Yeah.
my first taste of civics, as it were, in grade 10. And it was many moons ago. There are certain things that, obviously we wish they would teach in school. I wish they would come back with home ec and shop class. And I know that some of that stuff still exists in certain forms, but just basic day-to-day things. I just went over with my wife. She doesn't know how to put air in a tire.
Yeah.
Just little things that come up every day that people are missing out on and maybe not had the opportunity to learn.
Yeah. Yeah.
In a lot of communities, I know here in Yarmouth, businesses are, especially small businesses, particularly those in the food service, are struggling for employees. I mean, I see on Facebook almost every other day that a restaurant has to close for a day because they have a shortage of staff. What's the situation like in Digby?
Really the same thing. There's been a number here that have closed because they were short-staffed for a day or couldn't stay open all day because they were short-staffed. I know immediately everybody blames it on CERB, but I don't think it's just CERB. I just think it's a perfect storm. It's not, they work, well, not very many in town that I know are minimum wage anymore. They've all bumped up their salaries a little bit or their hourly wage, not a lot, but I think it's yes, CERB, COVID, a lack of people interested in working in that industry, and like I said, our average age in town is 48. So typically, that industry is looked upon as a young person's job, but really it isn't. But that's what they look at. I think there's all kinds of other factors just besides serve, because they can work. They can work at, well, some restaurants I'm familiar with. They can work at a restaurant and make $30,000-$40,000 a year. So live on serve or make good money.
So, from an economic development standpoint, Mayor, what's on the slate for the town of Digby right now?
I think well, probably the two major things were I sit on the Port Association here, and we received $3 million just a few months ago do some expansion of some floating docks and a number of things there, and that's part of our dream of a $40-odd million expansion. Because we're over capacity. That wharf is at 72 boats, and those boats have got bigger and wider. We're up to sometimes 120 or 30 boats, so we're over capacity. So that's a huge project. The other one that's people are going to see some activity this fall is the Pines Hotel, the Pines Resort. They are getting ready, once it closes, to winterize that project, that building. Going to winterize it so they can stay open longer and maybe all year long. And building some condominiums on the waterfront.
Wow!
And they're actually promoting that now. If you're interested in owning a condominium on the waterfront in front of the Pines, they're pushing that now. So that's going to dramatically change that resort and the look of the waterfront out on Shore Road near the ferry terminal. Yes, and that's huge dollars. And there's even a phase 3 that might come through, which would be even bigger. But the first phase is winterize and sell some condominiums.
What's your internet coverage like?
Generally good. There are some weak spots. Now, I live in the town of Digby, but I can't get fiber optic. But I'm on one street that doesn't have fiber optic. Now, there are areas. I guess they just don't want me out there saying anything. But there are, because of the geographic area here, hills and valleys and down 217 and areas like Bear River, there are some challenges, but they are addressing them. They've been working in the area over the last, I'd say, six to 10 months now. So that's slowly improving.
Well, certainly, and the reason I bring that up, of course, is, through COVID, everybody's had an opportunity, I guess, to work from home if their industry allowed. Certainly, my day job affords me the flexibility of working from anywhere as long as my internet is stable. But I also live in a rural area, and I only had one option when I went to hook up. Unfortunately, the other people, I won't mention company names, but the other company didn't run there. Now apparently they're running lines everywhere, which is really good to see, in order to be able to connect people in the rural areas, and I think that's extremely important for convenience sake, which is one thing. Heaven forbid my wife can't connect her Candy Crush, but but when you look at the ability to be able to work from home, a lot of opportunities are just cruxing and cornerstoning on that aspect.
Yeah, it's tough. I think it should become a utility. And something like power and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a must-have. It's not a want anymore. It's a need.
It's just part of the fabric of everyday life. You have to do everything today, or a lot, on the internet. And you walk into a bank thinking you're walking around the internet, but you're walking to a teller that needs access to the internet to do some of their work. So yeah, it's a must. So turn it into a utility and make it happen. And they are. Develop Nova Scotia has been working on the project, and our Western Ren in Southwest Nova has been working on the project. So I think over the next 2 or 3 years, we're going to address most of those issues.
I think that's going to be fantastic, especially for
Yeah.
a province like ours.
Hmm.
I mean, most of the province is considered "quote unquote" rural, so
Yes.
you got to be able to pull that part of it together. And I mean, touching back on telehealth or virtual care, but also for the kids to be able to do their schooling.
Yep.
I mean, if
Oh,
we
yes. See, that became an obvious
sure.
gap over this last year.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing like trying to do that by paper. My my grandson, unfortunately, they didn't have reliable internet where they were, and they couldn't log in. So, he had to get the paper version of his lessons,
Hmm.
and that was wow, that
Yeah.
was brutal.
Yeah. That's tough, and it's not fair to that one child's missing out on the opportunity to advance, while the other one's sitting where there's high-speed internet or fiber optic or something. It's just not fair to everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be because you didn't have the right sneakers. Now it's if
Yeah.
you don't have internet, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So what's on the agenda for 2022? Let's just jump right to the end on this and give you an
Uh,
opportunity to tell our listeners what's on the slate.
well, we want everybody to come back. Digby was, like I said, 30 years ago, considered the most romantic town in Canada. Victoria, BC finished second. Just this year or last year, we were voted some of the friendliest people in Canada. Our festivals will be back. We'll be hopefully you'll see some activity down at the Port Association. You'll see a large amount of development happening at the Pines. And we do have a streetscape program that we're hoping that we can kickstart that again in a year or so. So that'll change the look of downtown. Everybody's favorite, bump outs. But yeah, so yeah, I think there's going to be a pent up need for people to get out. And remember, after the First War and the Spanish flu, the Roaring '20s. I hope that's what we see over the next 10 years here.
Big band and crazy
Big
dress.
bang, yeah, exactly.
Break out your fedora, Mayor, and you'd be all set.
We'll be ready to roll.
So with that in mind, in looking ahead, if somebody wants to reach out and just find out what's going on, what's the best way for them to find out?
There's a very good website called digbyarea.ca. They're a tourism group, and they have an excellent website, videos that covers the region. So they put what's happening in events, whether it's in Digby or whether it's in Westport or Barrie or Weymouth or Havelock. The other thing is just contact the town or go on the town's website or visit our VIC. And not only is it tourism related, but it's just, hey, this is what's going on in the town this year. If they want to know what we plan on doing, come to council or give us a call or read our newsletter.
Well, we'll certainly be doing another chat with you, I know, in the future. Some very exciting things in the town of Digby. Mayor Ben Cleveland, thank you so much for your time.
It's great. Great chat with both of you. Hopefully you can do it again soon.
Thank you. I'm Gary Nickerson.
And I'm Quinn Taggart.
And this has been Outside My Window.